I remember my own father who had a stroke, and he recovered to a point that with mother's eyes he could drive. And that was some scary affair.
Pretty scary.
Gun it. Break. Excellent. Break left.
That didn't work out so hot, did it?
No.
Cameron would rather sacrifice his career than pick the phone up to me. So that's my view.
And take his whole party over the cliff?
Yeah.
The propensity of Russia to authoritarian abuse is even now being demonstrated in Putin's outrageous repression of Russian gays.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, The Zoomer with Conrad Black and Denise Donner.
Greetings, everyone. Today on the show, we're going to hit the pavement and go for a drive. And Conrad, you've got a conversation with a gentleman who survived a plane crash, testicular cancer, and he's now surviving politics in England as leader of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage.
Yes, indeed, and he's pulling 20% in the polls across the country, so he may determine who the next prime minister is, as between the leaders of the Conservative and Labour parties. He is not, he's a member of the European Parliament. He's about to sweep the European parliamentary elections in Britain, which means that the British delegation will be led by people who want to de-integrate. They don't necessarily want to leave Europe, but they object to Europeans telling them how to stack bananas in grocery stores and what size of condoms they must use and things like that.
So a good guy to know early, then, is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, a very interesting man, too.
Do you remember the classic used car sales line that people used to use? You know, this car was only driven on Sundays by a little old lady. Did you ever wonder how that little old lady got around after she got rid of that car? Let's Model T up the topic.
Hey, hop in. There's nothing like the freedom of the open road, the wind in your hair, some tunes on the dial, the pedal to the metal. I'm gonna drive forever. Is there a problem, officer? In 2009, 3,250,000 people aged 65 and over had a driver's license. 200,000 were 85 and up. Over 100 centenarians in Ontario and Manitoba are licensed drivers. As we age, cognitive decline, mobility, and vision can become challenges. In Ontario alone, 45,000 people with driver's licenses also had dementia. And by 2028, that number is expected to be over 100,000. So how old is too old? Teenagers ramp up to get a full driver's license. Should seniors ramp down in a similar way? Is driving a right or a privilege? That's the gray area, because for many Zoomers, the key to personal freedom is the key to the car.
And we've gathered some car-savvy friends around the table to help us sort out this very important subject. Conrad, do you remember your first car?
Oh,
first,
indeed, yeah.
First date in the first car?
Yes, I do. I remember that, too.
You want to share it with us?
I don't think it's that kind of show.
We're safe enough here. I don't think the person I was dating remembers it very well. At least I hope she does. Yeah, it was a Chevrolet.
A Chevrolet?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a nice car.
Well, let's talk about some of the preconceptions we have around driving young people, old people, midlife crisis people. Sergeant Bob, you're a retired OPP officer and been a paramedic before that. You've probably seen it all. Do people think that older drivers are worse drivers?
I won't say they're worse drivers, but they certainly require a little more attention. We have road safety and the survival of our panelists, the audience, and everyone at home, and that simply cannot be trumped. So that has to take priority. On the other hand, we have seniors whose lifestyle, their life in general, will be completely impacted if they can no longer drive. And I think it's people in the driver's seat, pardon the pun, who make these decisions have to sort of weigh both sides. We have to help our seniors. Maybe a graduated exiting system, as you touched on earlier, is the answer. So we have to be advocates for the senior drivers, but again, nothing trumps road safety. When a senior simply cannot operate the vehicle safely, it simply has to stop. I'm not saying they can't be helped and trained, but there will come a point for all of us when you simply have to stop.
Right.
No discussion.
Bob, it shouldn't be an arbitrary age, should it? I mean, obviously, Don here is a perfectly competent driver, and he would, though he doesn't look it, he's a man in his mid-80s. Well, some people significantly younger have lost all ability to drive, even if they're once competent drivers. It's just a matter of more frequent testing, isn't it? You can't say you can't drive past the age of 80 or something like that.
Yes, you're quite right. It should not be arbitrary, which I think it puts a greater demand on training, testing, and unfortunately, these things are expensive. So my fear is that we're going in the wrong direction. We're going to take the path that is least expensive when we should actually be putting in a little more attention, a little more money onto not making that arbitrary decision. Individuals have to be treated as individuals.
Minister, because Ontario is just about to introduce some new testing regulations,
That's right?
right?
Yes.
What are they?
As of April 21st, they do not require any more knowledge exam, if you will, writing or computer-wise. They will still have to provide the driving record, vision test. They will have to attend in-class session. But we eliminate a lot of stress for a lot of seniors where they say, you know, I've driven 40 years, no accident, drive from home to church, to shopping, whatever. But doing a written test, a knowledge test, it really scares me.
Very hard. I know people study and they get very nervous.
This is where we come in and say, we got to make it easier for people that they are still healthy. They want to live in their community, they want to be active in their community, why not?
Right.
So I think we have gone a good way allowing the seniors to live more independently for as long and active as possible.
We have to find some way. I'm fine today, but if I start to show dementia and I can't function, someone has to be there and I have to be shown that I can. Now, I remember my own father who had a stroke, and he recovered to a point that with mother's eyes he could drive. And that was some scary affair.
That's pretty scary.
But you know, I will say at some point one day my father got in the car, drove it to the end of the laneway, stopped, and backed up, and came into the house and handed my mother the keys. I hope I'm bright enough to do that. But there are a lot of people who are driving who aren't bright enough to do that, and we have to identify them.
But Susan, people tend to self-regulate, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I think that what we're talking about here, and I think Bob is absolutely right, there's, first of all, we're working within a perfume of assumptions about a person who's older and who tries to drive. There's a presumption they're not going to be safe. We don't test all the other drivers of all other ages all the time to see whether or not they're safe drivers, but as soon as they hit a certain age, we put them through a grill. So we have to stop from it and see, what are we doing, what are we presuming, and whether or not it's fair to take away their license and their independence without a fair system of assessing their ability to drive. Not whether or not they're shaky or what else, but whether or not they can drive safely, and that's what we're after.
But the thousands of drivers that we see in our schools, we see poor drivers, badly trained drivers or dangerous drivers that span the whole age, you know, right from 16 to 85. So we shouldn't be picking on, you know, 80-year-old drivers or 75-year-old drivers and saying, you know, this is going to be a bad driver. What we really need is testing that goes on from 16-year-old right up. As long as the driver has his license, there should be, you know, 5 years.
You'd increase the frequency of it.
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
I agree with that.
Let me ask you this, all of you who know this. Is there anything to be said for varying licenses according to where people live? I mean, it's one thing to drive in Lindsay, Ontario, and something else to drive on the Don Valley Parkway in rush hour. I mean, is there any future in that kind of thing?
I would love to see something more of a graduated license for all drivers where, you know, maybe a license that allow you to drive in the urban scene, and then a 400 series license. And then every 5 years, everybody should be retested to see what their capability is.
Well, we retest people every 5 years for different types of license grades. All right, so if you've got a professional truck license, or if you've got an air brake endorsement, or if you're a paramedic, all of the other license grades have to be retested every 5 years. The G license holder is the only one that doesn't have more scrutiny.
Let me show you a thing about distracted driving, which I think will open up all our eyes.
Avant, on n'écrivait pas de messages en conduisant. Il y avait sûrement de bonnes raisons.
We know that the numbers for distracted drivers are even more amplified than drunk drivers at this point. But seniors, they're not texting in the car.
It's not so much of a concern for them. And we were talking about self-regulating ourselves as we age. And a lot of seniors, you know, they choose not to drive at night. They choose not to drive in inclement weather. They choose not to drive on the highways. And some of our road tests still have a mandatory highway component. They're not. They know better. They're in many ways a lot more experienced than our younger drivers, and we need to actually start paying attention to that.
Right. So we've also, at our little table here, made some real assumptions about the types of drivers. You know, the distracted teenager, the little old lady, the rock star in the hot car. Well, I had one of each in my house. So we made a little wager and we put them to the test, the driving test. Have a look.
Welcome. My name is Sean Diager. I'll be your instructor for today. Unfortunately, our bodies and brains are all different as we age. For the older driver, your brain doesn't work as quickly. We also have some delayed reaction times. Our thinking isn't as quick or as sharp. You also require 10 times more light to see the same clarity as a middle-aged person does. Now, for yourself, you're a little bit over the age where we start deteriorating. At 50 years old, our brains start dropping off, as do our physical reflexes. Younger drivers, however, especially those under the age of 25, our brains haven't fully developed yet at that age. The last part of our brain to develop is the frontal lobe, which handles risk versus reward decisions. This is why young males get into more collisions. Okay, so this is our emergency braking exercise. And whenever you're ready, go for it, okay? Let's go a little quicker. Don't hit the brakes yet. Yes. Brake hard. Excellent. Brake hard. Okay, you anticipated that one. Gun it. Brake. Excellent. Brake left.
That didn't work out so hot, did it?
No. Oh, I did him good.
Damn it. Damn it. Oh.
Hi, no, Matt. Matt, I'm going to put you on hold, okay? I got my dad on the other line. Hi, Dad. Hi. Yeah, tonight at around 7. No, don't drive. We have to talk about your driving. Come on, you're 86. You're a hazard on the road. Oh, jerk. Okay, I'll see you then. Hang on, I got a text. God damn, I can play It was a controlled course.
Denise, despite that tape, which I suspect was not completely spontaneous, you have a very distinguished record. You've never had an accident. You've never had a citation, have you? And you can drive a motorcycle. You've driven trucks.
Boats, trucks,
yeah. Well, everything except airplanes.
No, my husband drives the airplanes. Yeah.
And fixed wing and helicopters both?
Not helicopters, yes.
But the fact is you are a good driver, and I've seen you drive.
Well, I did get my first speeding ticket about 2 hours after I got my license. I was driving back from the, woohoo, got my license.
Yeah, so excited.
I was full of teenagers, all my friends in the car, and the policeman pulled me over, and I handed him my license, and he went, "Doing well, aren't we?"
That was a mean policeman. You wouldn't have done that, would you? When you were a new driver, you'd say, just slow it down a bit.
You'll notice how that officer did set the course for the rest of your driving years.
Very good.
Might have been 5 minutes well spent. You never know.
Cars these days, Cheryl, you work in the futurist part of the industry. So when you think about Zoomers, who really have 15 times the buying power of millennials at this point, are you thinking about safety? What's your focus?
Oh, sure. Safety is top of mind. We're irrespective of age. We're always thinking about what can we do to make sure that the vehicle it's safe for the passenger as well as the drivers. With regard specifically to an aging population, we have some really wonderful wonderful tools. Ford has something called a third age suit, and so our designers or engineers can put on this wearable suit that mimics the effects of aging. So they can't bend, they have trouble bending their knees. They wear gloves to show the loss of dexterity and sensitivity in their fingertips. They wear glasses that mimic glaucoma or other visual impairments, and their neck has difficulty moving, so that they can now get inside of a vehicle and say, all right, this is what it's like to live in the body of an aged person and understand the reduced response time, the impaired vision, the limited range of motion. And then they go about designing or engineering a vehicle that address those issues. We have features that are designed to appeal to you whether you're 71 or 17. Mm-hmm. And those things are things like adaptive cruise control. You might not notice that the car in front of you is starting to slow down or brake, and that the car has sensor systems that will make sure that you keep a safe distance between you and the car in front of you. We have blind spot alerts that tell you that there might be a vehicle on either to your right or your left that warn you not to cross lanes. We have active park assist, so that your car literally
parks itself.
Literally parks itself.
Oh, Ian doesn't like that.
I don't like that.
No. See, Ford looks, or Ford,
You mean
all the
officially or
manufacturers,
personally?
all the manufacturers will look at that as safety features, whereas from a driving expert point of view, when you're saying to the driver, you can set your cruise control and not worry so much about whether you're gaining on the car in front of you. You've got these little gizmos that are going to tell you if you start to drift out of your lane. You've got another gizmo over here that's going to tell you if somebody's in your blind spot. What's happening is you're starting to remove the driver from the function of driving. And you're saying to them, well, you don't have these responsibilities anymore because we put these little computers and gizmos in there to do it. So now you're saying to the driver, well, you've got time to do other things like maybe text or call somebody. And when it comes to park assist, the way we like to look at it is if you really need a computer to park your car, it's time to hang up the keys.
I'm sorry, but I've never learned to parallel park, and I don't expect I ever will. I drive around until I find a place I don't have to.
That's like a,
That's even better.
Well done.
Yeah, but you can still back into a spot.
Yes, if
And-
I'm lucky, I can back in like they tell me
That's
to.
a sign
And
of a
so,
good driver.
but you have to realize that aging's not the only consideration here. And these features we offer as convenience, not as safety functions per se. And so, to Don's point, when you're in a city like Toronto and you're looking for one of the precious few parking spots, we have sensors that say whether or not the space is large enough to accommodate your vehicle. I mean, that's half the battle of finding a parking spot. And I agree with you, but I think your argument is based on, the chicken or the egg theory, is that you're saying, well, we're making it so convenient, people are letting go of their driving responsibilities and their skill set. We're saying people are so overtaxed and overstimulated in the responsibilities they have that they are bringing their phones into the car. They're bringing their work, their job responsibilities, their personal responsibilities that are distracting from the driving. And so that's our reality, and we're trying to address the consumer market demand that's saying, I want paired...
Cheryl, from a safety or point of view, that's fine. But what about the comfort? A lot of problems, especially with seniors, that they still have to drive a little bit. The seats are so tight, so small, that they start to feel pain on their side here. Comfortable means a lot for a senior especially.
And
are you considering looking and making seats more comfortable in cars?
Well, that's ultimately our goal. So the third age seat that I mentioned already, we have things like we've increased the size, the width of the door, and the height of the lip so that you don't have to lift your legs as high to crawl into the vehicle. My mother's 80 years old, and when she gets into a vehicle, she leads with her bum. And then once she's stable and seated, then she swings around. And so our designers and engineers try to ergonomically understand or anticipate that sort of movement, as opposed to your son, probably steps in sideways. Leads with one foot and then kind of swings wakes himself in.
But there's something seniors need to consider as far as I'm concerned, and that is you should decide 5 years before you're going to quit driving to buy your last car. The last thing you need is a new car in the second last year you're going to drive, because it'll all have different places and you can't respond as you have historically. And it's for me, and the other thing is, if you've driven a big car, the older you get a smaller one. It gives you a little more tolerance in when you're meeting and passing and going around corners. Those are just simple things that a senior can do within the industry.
What about, wouldn't there be a market for a beautifully designed, lovely car that doesn't have so much stuff? I recently bought a 2-year-old car, and I get in and I'm like, turn that off and turn that off, and the paddles, and I just turn stuff off because I really want it to be simple.
I think one of the worst things they've put in cars, modern cars, is the touch screen on the dashboard.
Yeah, I turn that off first.
You turn that off, you've got a lot of your controls on there. So what you're telling the driver is, take your eyes off the road, focus down on the screen so you can find out, well, maybe this is where the climate controls are. And then the good thing about the old style of buttons and knobs and switches was muscle memory would help the driver out. You knew where the button was for your fan. You could crank it up to whatever you want. You could feel it. You could know how many notches you turned it. But with the touch screens that they're putting in the new vehicles now, the driver has to actually look to find and then say, well, am I actually touching the right place, and have I got the right number dialed up?
But Ian, this is universal. I mean, I use my wife's car, I have a terrible time figuring out how the window wiper works. Then the thing goes at the back, and it drives you crazy. But it's like television. You have to be a B-52 pilot to turn on your television set.
My brother bought a BMW X3, and the owner's manual is about that thick. He's never going to make his way through that to find out what all the silly little things that do in it.
Don, do you agree with me that it was a better world when all we had for television was contrast, horizontal, vertical, color, and the channel?
Yes, and my T model that I drove was one of the better cars I had. Credit to fault.
Well, thank you. But one of the challenges you have is that you have new technology that's shaping the way that humans interact with machines. And so the touchscreen tablet has become a standard. It's a standard in banking. It's a standard when you go to the airport. And so there is this intuitive learning sense that if you bring those things into a vehicle. To your point, though, we have redundant controls so that if you want to do anything on that touchscreen, you can do it by touching your steering wheel, or it can be voice activated, so that ultimately our goal is to keep your hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, and the mind on the drive. So what we're trying to do is take this technology and give you several different points of entry so that those people who consider themselves technophiles can quickly adapt, and those who want a more traditional approach still have the tools that have always been available to them.
We're going to have a little break. We're back in a sec with more on driving, but first, part 2 of My Driven Family.
We're going to be going through the exercises. Do not worry about hitting a cone. It will happen.
Okay, you ready?
Yep, go.
Brake right. See, brake right, I didn't hear. I just heard brake. Brake left.
Ooh. Nicely done. Nicely done.
Brake right.
I hit it.
Yeah, you hit it. You hit about 2 of them. Okay, welcome to our slalom course. The key here is to not look at the cones. Very, very good. Because that could have easily been a curb or a kid. I want you to go around the cones like a serpentine. Work on getting around the cones.
I just don't want to hit him.
That didn't work out so hot.
We're going to be going over some driving exercises.
Brake hard. Brake left.
Okay, you guys did an excellent job today. It was very, very impressive. We threw a lot of things at you today that you haven't experienced before. Hopefully you'll never have to experience any of these types of maneuvers again in the real world, because that means you're having a really bad day. For the braking exercise, emergency braking, Duncan, that was hands down you. You've got the fastest reflexes of anybody here, and again, that's a benefit of youth.
Brake.
For the slalom course, however, you got that one nailed. You owned it. You had phenomenal vision control. You kept your eyes nice and oriented with the horizon. You were able to go through smoother and faster than everybody else. And again, that comes with the benefits of age and experience in your case. For our elder age group, okay, for our collision avoidance exercise, obviously we had that most difficult for you in that one.
Brake right.
But our winner, Duncan, again, got the benefits of fast reflexes, and he didn't send cones flying across the course. Like you did.
I think we should do it again.
Today on the Zoomer, it's all about the ride. But I do want to do a shout out to my mom. So you saw at the end where she said, let's do it again. She said all along she wanted to compete in her little old Honda Civic that she was used to, and she remained certain she would have creamed those boys if she was driving her on wheels. So here's to you, Mom. Thanks for being a good sport. Okay. So one of the things I did want to bring you up to speed on was our Zoomer pulse. So we asked the audience, when driving, what makes you the most nervous? Merging onto a major highway, 40%. Parallel parking, 34%. And a left turn at a busy intersection, 26%. So there you go. We're going to talk about the talk. What are the signs first? Ian, if you see that somebody really needs to have, they got to surrender their keys, what signs should we be looking for to see if that's an inevitability?
I think a big part of it is the decision-making skills. You know, have they slowed down their mental capacity to the point where they can't make those important decisions anymore? So I think we should be testing every driver for that. You know, that can happen at 55, 60, it doesn't matter. But we need to look for that.
Right. Sergeant Bob, you've got an acid test, right, that actually says what to look for?
So what we've done is developed a little simple test, and it, in a way, takes a burden off the loved ones or the family members. And if you go through the list, and you touched on some of them in your survey there, you no longer drive on a 400 series highway. You no longer feel comfortable turning left at a busy intersection. You cannot parallel park even in a generous opening. We all have struggled with the tight ones. Mm-hmm. You don't no longer drive at night. Then you should either go and see someone like Ian so that some of these things can be corrected, or you have to hang up the keys.
And you can start looking for things. You could offer to go for a ride with them to see how they're actually driving. You could check the car for little extra dings and scratches.
That's one of the things I recommend a lot is asking, look, if you find out that mom or dad has perhaps had a discussion with a police officer about their driving recently, or if you're noticing scratches and dings in their car that weren't necessarily there a month ago, you can start inquiring, okay, what did that happen? Now, I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, that one doesn't count. It was in a parking lot. Yes, it does.
Right.
Yeah, so watch out for that.
And doctors have a role to play, right?
They do, but they kind of miss the mark a little bit because doctors don't like saying, we're going to have to revoke your license medically or for a medical reason, because they know the impact that's going to have in their life. But the doctors themselves, and I've discussed this with a few of them, they aren't driving experts and they know it. So although their patient may be starting to show some of the signs of dementia and they may be taking medication now to treat those symptoms, they don't know as a medical professional how it actually impacts their abilities as a safe driver without actually getting in the car with them, which they're not really qualified to make a driving assessment. So when I do assessments with people and say, okay, now we got to adjust this a little bit different, or I can sit with them and say, let's just work on this one little thing. That's all we got to really worry about, and they can keep their license longer.
Yeah. So and doctors have a relationship with their patient anyway,
exactly.
So they don't want to compromise.
They don't want to compromise that.
For car-savvy people, you really know how to cut people off. You've been an excellent panel, and we're just going to bounce around the table a little bit to our car experts to find out what your favorite rides are. Cheryl, let's start with you.
Well, I heard one of your audience members, I think Dave, said the Mustang. I mean, when you think about the love of driving, open roads, pedal to the metal, wind in your hair, what better car to do it in than a Mustang?
And a candy apple red one, too, probably.
Amen.
Yeah, there you go, Sean.
Well, what better to do it on with the wind in your hair than do it on a motorcycle? Personally, yeah, I would go with maybe an enduro, like off-road, on-road type motorcycle, pack it up with some camping gear, take off for a week or two. If I can't pack it, I don't need it. So, yeah, there's a good representation there. It's what I want.
There you go. Ian.
Oh, I would say the best car I've driven is the McLaren MP4 12C. Oh. Just an amazing car.
Oh, really? Let's all get one.
It's just a phenomenon. It is the epitome of a supercar.
Sergeant Bob.
I would pick a 1973 BMW 2002 TII, which is a specific nice little sedan. I've had a few of them over the years, but never a really nice one, and that would be my dream ride.
Of the luxury cars that I've known myself, a Bentley is the best I've had.
A Bentley? Do you have a Bentley now?
No, I did in England. I have an old Rolls Royce here, but not a Bentley.
Can I borrow it?
Sure.
Okay.
But not in this weather. No.
Not in this weather. All right. We'll wait for the summer. We're going to be back in a second, then off to the UK for Conrad's conversation with UK independence leader Nigel Farage. Farage sounds kind of French to me.
And his wife's German. He's not anti-European. He's just anti-European Union.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll find out about that in just a minute. Stay with us.
Cameron would rather sacrifice his career than pick the phone up to me. So that's my view.
And take his whole party over the cliff?
Yeah.
Welcome back. Conrad, a while ago you sat down with Nigel Farage, who's the leader of the UK Independence Party.
Yes.
And I take it that they're EU negative, although that sounds a bit like a blood type.
Yeah, but he's not a xenophobe. Don't confuse the UK Independence Party with the British National Party. They're skinheads and they're bad people.
Right.
And they're just thugs. His party is a serious party, and they want a close association with Europe, but they don't want Britain subsumed into Europe, so the British government is just like a municipal government.
So you talked a bit about
He's
that.
a reasonable man. Okay. I urge all viewers to look for him on YouTube. He's the most amusing public speaker in all Europe.
All right, but before you go to YouTube, have a gander at this.
My guest today is Nigel Farage, who is, well, though he is skeptical about the expression, the leader of the unofficial opposition in the UK, and the head of the United Kingdom Independence Party. And you're now running at close to 20% in the polls, are you not?
Yeah, we've had an amazing rise. And in fact, on May the 2nd this year, we had a whole rash of elections in the English counties, not the big cities, but in the shires. And in those elections, we got nearly a quarter of the vote across the country, which was pretty astonishing stuff. Even I was surprised. So there's something going on here. And I think it's really twofold. Firstly, it's about policy. And we have a basic principle that we should be a self-governing, independent, democratic nation, which may sound obvious to all your viewers, but we've given it away. We've literally given away the ability to make most of our laws to Brussels. We've given away the ability to control our borders. It's costing us a lot of money. That's the first reason UKIP's doing well. We're resonating, on a massive constitutional question. And the second reason we're doing well, and we're seeing snaps of this in other parts of the Western world, is there's been this almost total victory of social democracy. The Conservatives aren't conservative anymore, the Labour Party aren't that socialist anymore, and the Liberal Democrats don't really know who they are. And so you've got these three parties who are so close to each other in terms of policy position, but also the people are so incredibly similar. They all go to a handful of the best schools, they all go to Oxford, they all study PPE, they all leave Oxford and become researchers in political offices, and they all become MPs age 27 or 28. And we finished up, if you look at the front benches, there's no one there that's set up a business. There's no one there that's risen up through the trade union. There's no one there that's founded a charity or been a soldier. There's just no connection with the ordinary real world. So part of our vote, I'm not ashamed to say it, part of our vote is a rejection of this political class and a desire for a kind of politics that is based on an understanding of how families live out there, and also perhaps being unafraid to say what you think.
Allow me to say a few words for Canadians not that familiar. No one must confuse the United Kingdom Independence Party with the British National Party, or skinheads and racists like that. I mean, you have a very serious, comprehensive program. That it's not excessively conservative. It's traditional in respect of British values.
It's actually,
but it's a free enterprise program. But you're not trying to send,
we're classical liberals.
Yeah, you're not trying to send every disadvantaged person out to sell pencils or something.
No. And it's quite interesting. I mean, because of the Commonwealth and the history and the shared history, we've actually, since the last war, been very open in this country to Commonwealth immigration, but to have it on a managed, sensible scale. So, I mean, from the 1950s onwards, something like 30 to 50,000 people a year from around the Commonwealth would come and settle in this country. Since Mr. Blair got to power, the numbers that now come into Britain are 500,000 a year. I mean, I was, as I go around the country, I see in Eastern England particularly that all the agricultural jobs, all the factory jobs have all been taken by people from Poland, Latvia, Lithuania. Now, many of them are very good, hard-working people. There's no question about that. And you can understand why a big employer might want to take these people on.
And they're grateful to be away from communism.
And many of them are, and many of them send money back home and all the rest of it. But you do have a problem when youth unemployment in Britain, by which I mean 16 to 24-year-olds, youth unemployment in Britain has doubled in the last 8 years. We now have 1 million of our youngsters on the scrap heap. So that also brings another level of social problem.
I'm sorry, but what happened to the Schengen Convention and all that sort of thing?
We are not part of Schengen. So we do actually ask people to show their passports when they're coming in, but we don't do any more than that. There is no restriction on the numbers of people that can come into Britain from Eastern Europe. And this issue is reaching fever pitch in British politics.
And are they entitled by virtue simply of arriving to stay as long as they want?
Oh, yes. Yes. All they have to do is to get permanent leave to remain. And they do that by getting a national insurance number. And it is an easy process. And actually, within 2 weeks of being here, you can claim job seekers allowance, i.e. unemployment benefit, qualify very quickly for housing benefit, and qualify for child benefit, even if your kids live in Warsaw.
As I understand it, your support, the support for your party, is practically uniform throughout the country.
Very much so. We're drawing our support from across the classes. We're drawing our support not just from Conservatives, but a lot of old Labour in this country are patriotic. They believe in the nation. They hate the thought of these ghastly people in Brussels making all the rules and telling us what to do. So actually, from north to south, east to west, in England, our support is uniform. Scotland is another matter.
Yeah, but 20% throughout the UK, apart perhaps from Scotland, is a mortal threat to the Conservative Party. If you hold there and they don't make an electoral arrangement with you, they have no chance of winning, do they?
I think that one of the reasons Mr. Cameron won't win is because of how well we're doing, and I understand that. But I think there are more reasons why Mr. Cameron won't win. The first is he's not a Conservative, which makes it quite difficult for Conservative voters. But the second reason is very interesting. I met John Howard, the former Australian Prime Minister.
Very nice man.
A guy
I just come from Australia. He's a lovely man.
He's a great guy,
and he's been here in England the last few days.
Oh yes, and he won 4 elections.
Yep.
And I talked to him about it, and he made the point that for Conservative parties to win in the Western world, they have to get what we used to call the blue-collar vote.
If you're running at between 20 and 25% of the polls, and there is absolutely no chance of the Conservatives being re-elected without making an arrangement with you, and the natural thing happens, and Cameron phones you up and says, "Look here, Nigel, old chap, of course we've had our differences, but your arithmetic is as good as mine, and why don't we see if we can't reach an agreement here?" You wouldn't just slam down the phone with 4-letter words to him, would you?
I never slam down the phone at anybody. I have used 4-letter words once or twice. But I mean, look, I personally think that Cameron would rather sacrifice his career than pick the phone up to me. But that's my view.
And take his whole party over the cliff?
Yeah. It seems to me that if the Conservative Party was led by somebody that actually understood what I'm talking about, that actually felt it, that there may well be the possibility of having an intelligent conversation.
Yes.
All right? Because you see, the point is, there are Labour-held marginals in the Midlands and the North in which the Conservatives haven't got a cat's chance in hell of winning.
No.
But a UKIP candidate might.
Yeah, or a fusion candidate.
Yeah, that's right. And the converse is true in the south of England. So there could be, at some point in time, an intelligent conversation, but I think for that to happen, Mr. Cameron doesn't need to be there.
Nigel, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Russia, which has been one of the world's great powers since Peter the Great 325 years ago, has not, by Western standards, had one day of good government. Assuming that the Sochi Olympics continue to be free of terrorist incidents, the world will be happy that Russia has carried out the Games with such a grand display of showmanship as well as athletic prowess. The whole world respects the culture and civilization of Russia. Its presentation of its own history in the opening conveniently left out such stars of national history as Ivan the Terrible, Lenin, and Stalin, which is quite excusable, and omitted any reference to the fact that Russia, which has been one of the world's great powers since Peter the Great 325 years ago, has not, by Western standards, had one day of good government. There has been no respect for human rights or the popular will, apart from fleeting and tokenistic nods to the Slavonic masses of Mother Russia, who only finally break their chains and revolt every 300 years or so. Western Europeans, British, Americans, and even Canadians who managed 2 Gilbert and Sullivan rebellions in 1837 have been less patient. The propensity of Russia to authoritarian abuse is even now being demonstrated in Putin's outrageous repression of Russian gays. There is room for reasonable debate about the attitude of individual churches and jurisdictions to same-sex marriage, but no civilized society can justify for a moment any discrimination against anyone because of adult voluntary sexual orientation. In these respects, Russia has not changed. It can still put on a spectacle, as Tchaikovsky, a repressed homosexual, did in firing off cannons and symphonies and operas. Fortunately, Canada has changed, and not only in gay rights. I remember when the whole country was excited when Canada won an Olympic bronze medal. It is uplifting to see Canada in hot contention for world leadership in these games, as it was in Vancouver. If Canada is a leader in sport, it can be in other fields as well. It's all a matter of confidence and national will, and it will happen in many other arenas.
Peppermint Bay. Lemonade stands everywhere, Cracker Jack bands fill the air, and there you are, happy landing on a chocolate bar.
And she'll be fondly remembered not only as a child star, but also as an ambassador, right?
Yeah, and I used to see her at conferences. Indeed, I went on the same plane with her to a conference in Austria once, and the airline officials thought that since I was Mr. Black and she was Mrs. Black, that I was her husband.
No, really?
I got pretty impressive treatment.
I bet you did.
And she was a very nice lady when I met her.
Yeah.
And she had a remarkable career.
Mm-hmm.
She was not one of these stars who, despite being a tremendous celebrity from childhood, disintegrated personally at all. She was a very fine person, a public-minded person.
Right. Big fundraiser for the Republicans, I understand.
Very, very friendly with the California Republican leaders, Mr. Nixon and Mr. Reagan.
Well, she will be missed. Next week, medical marijuana is our subject, and we're going to be bringing you the leading thinkers on the new Canadian regulations, pro and con. And Conrad, who are you talking to?
I'm talking to Bob Carr.
Yes, the Foreign Secretary of Australia.
And a very impressive expert in international affairs.
Okay.
As you just said, a great friend of Kissinger's.
We're going to be, yeah, Kissinger had nice things to say about Shirley Temple, too.
Mm-hmm.
He did, called her very intelligent, very tough-minded, and very disciplined, which is what I think you'd have to be for being a child star.
He has no higher praise.
Yeah, that's it for the Zoomer. And I also want to thank our studio audience for joining us. You're going to be getting this, hard copy editions of Commander Chris Hadfield's book, which is a lovely read, right, Conrad?
It is. It's a terrific read.
All right, thank you for joining us. Let's zoom out.